Hi everybody, it is me, Jesse Martineau, once again, from Lights Camera Dad. Check out the cool little thing I added. My friend drew this of me, so I had to add it onto the website. Well, today we're going to talk about HDR photography, and you've probably heard and seen many HDR images. It was made popular a few years ago, and has gone through some good transitions and some evil, horrific, horrible, and all those other descriptive words that explain how I already used the word horrible. Explain how bad, for the lack of a better word, this procedure can be when done incorrectly. I'm going to take you through my process in this. And take you from this. This I shot in Kelowna, British Columbia, Canada, at Mission Hill Winery. It's just, pretty standard scene, but had a lot of ranges of light. Let me explain first. HDR, if you're unaware, very quickly now, is called high dynamic range, meaning your camera can only capture certain limits of light. Now, with new cameras, the range of light from dark all the way up to the brightest spots up here, the highlights, is very wide now. And I could probably take this image here and make it into something I wanted. But to stretch that range out a little more, you can take a series of exposures. And in this scenario, I took 3. And now I really only take 3 now. When I had a Canon T3i, I used to take upwards of 9. It was probably a little overkill, but for a less sensitive sensor in that camera, it helped at times. Now with my new camera, the Nikon D600, very good dynamic range already, and so I take 3 separate images at different exposures. And you can see here what it's doing. Look at the shutter speed. So that's what we're going to be making. Here is my my normal exposure. Now I'm probably a little overexposed in this image, but for this scenario it'll work fine, and it did work. So I'm 1/250th of a second, 1/1000 for my dark frame, and there's my light frame there. Very light, very blown out. I'm not sure how much information it's actually going to pull on this one. So anyway, to the HDR time, I use a program called Photomatix. I found it able to work really good. Now, there's a new program called Aurora HDR, and it's for Mac only. Blah. And so I'm interested in trying that when the PC version comes out. But this is what I use primarily. You can also, when you select all 3 of these and right click, you can also now merge to HDR right in Lightroom. You can do this in Photoshop as well, but you can do this right in Lightroom now. The problem is, I'm not going to do it today, but I'll show you another time. I don't really like how it works the image in this one. I think you don't get enough control. So today, I'm going to do what I normally do with an HDR image, and take it through Photomatix. So the first step is you select the 3 frames you want, and you are simply going to export it to Photomatix. So you scroll down to export. I have a little clever, very helpful little plug-in there for Photomatix, and so you just click that. Ask you a few questions here. Align images, you want that, especially even when you're taken on a tripod, which I wasn't here. It was actually handheld. They wouldn't let me use a tripod here. Funny. So that it slows obviously down if it has to do this stuff, but I like to leave it on anyway. Show options to remove ghosts. That's if you have a lot of moving objects in the frame. Things will be ghosting in appearance. I don't really have any in this, so I'm not going to turn that on. Reduce noise. I don't really need that on right now. And chromatic aberrations, typically we used to put that on, but it says here If you have Lightroom version 3 or higher, you don't really need to. So I don't bother. Just a little further down, automatically re-import into Lightroom library. Yes, that's very handy. It'll just bring it right back into here when we're done. So it's all set up there. All that stuff is pretty much default. All you do is hit export. It'll do its little thing. Alright, so it's now being brought into Photomatix here. It's merging to HDR. If you can't read, I hope you can. And here we are. This is our merged image. It took all three, let me show you, it took all three of these images and merged them together. And what Photomatix is trying to do is give you a flat image. And you can see I have detail in terms of light in all the areas. Nothing's blowing out, really. Looks like it's, you know, a little spot there maybe, but, and nothing's too dark. It's flat now. Now that we're in Photomatix, I have it. Photomatix saves the last time you exported an image. So this is the last setting you have. You can also build presets. And I used to have hundreds of these presets. But I realized, you know, I didn't want them anymore, so I just deleted them all. So you can go through and flip through some of these presets. Here's my mountains again, Gandalf. Remember that from my first video? That was funny. But you can go through your presets. I typically do that. I usually go around these things. I have different ones for real estate and things like that as well. So I'm going to take you quickly through these sliders just to help get you familiarized, make you familiar, make you comfortable with the settings. Strength is how much you want it to merge or push your photos together. And so I usually, you know, turn this up quite a bit. There's sometimes I'll dial it back a little bit if I find something's too dark, because you're not doing your final edit here. Let me stress that. And this is part of the problem, I think, with HDR, is that people just take it into the stage and they're done with it after this. But I'll show you what happens to them. Color saturation, you can kind of go with that as you go. Again, like I said, I love to have it flat. I'm going to do my later adjustments in Lightroom itself. Tone compression. I'm going to show you some things with this that is horrendous. And it's more like this. What happens is people, have you seen trees and stuff that look like this? Or textures? And they just don't look right, do they? It looks horrible. This is what's giving HDR a very bad name. HDR can be an amazing tool to really help you in a lot of different lighting environments. That's what it's meant for. It is not meant as a look. And unfortunately, I see so many Instagram groups and across social media where they share images that are like this. And any other like good images of HDR that I've seen, they just don't share it because they think it's supposed to look like this. It isn't. It really isn't supposed to look like this. So tone compression, you saw what it did there. It's figuring out how much light you want to let into this thing. When you get into this end, it's really wrecking it. And I'm not exactly sure what it's doing, but it doesn't look good. So I try to keep that still flat, but you really don't need to go too high on these numbers. Detail, contrast, same kind of thing. You probably make it even worse like this. Yes. Let's see what this does. And so I try to keep these things relatively low numbered because you're going to put contrast back in later. What I'm trying to do is make this look like, okay, remember this could really help. I'm trying to make this image look like how it looked when I was standing there, because our eyes have great dynamic range. You can sit in a dark room, see things inside of the room, and look out the window and see the stuff out there. A camera can't do that, so we're trying to mimic that very thing with a camera. So what I'm trying to do in this Photomatix program is recreate what it's like in terms of light standing there at this time of day. And this is very similar to what it was like. So Let's keep going on. Highlight smoothing will do just that. It actually starts to see how it fixes the light there. It's, again, trying to aim for a flatter type of image just with the right light. White point, you can set all this stuff in your blacks and that. Default is very close to these two settings here. Gamma is something that you really shouldn't play with. Again, you've probably seen images like this. Ugh. So try to keep that at its default. If you double click on this as well, it'll go back to its default state, which is 1 in this case. Color temperature, you can shift this a bit. I shift this more if I am doing an inside shot and I see blue light coming in. I'll try to tweak it a little bit here, but really most of this can be done in Lightroom itself. Micro smoothing is going to try to smooth out some of those textures. When you dial it back, it's going to bring in a lot more darks. Now, this can be helpful in a daytime, but in night shots, it can really add some serious grain to your image, some noise, and you don't want that. Saturation, highlights, and shadows is just that. How much color is saturated in the highlights or in the shadows. I'd leave those on 0 typically. Shadow smoothness is like works in the shadows, pretty much the same as the highlight one. Now, shadow clipping is your clip point of where the darks are going to be, and it'll make anything below this black, so you don't have a weird purpley thing. I usually try to leave this on 0 because I try not to have an image that I need to use that at all. All right, there's different methods as well on Photomatix. There's something called exposure fusion. It's a different way of how it merges it, and then they have a bunch of different things like real estate and stuff like that. I stay away from those typically. I might use this real estate one just in the real estate things. There's a lot of tutorials that go through every single one of these things, but honestly, tone mapping and detail enhancer, not any of these other ones, detail enhancer is what is really going to help merge your image together into flatness. So here we have a combination of those 3 photos, and I think that looks pretty good. I can work with this image now. And now all you do is save and re-import, and it's going to do that for you, and it's going to send it right back into Lightroom. So here we go. So now we have this. It saves it as a TIFF, as you can see there. We have these 3 images that have now been merged into this image. So that's basically all we need to do with the HDR part. That part is now done. Now you're going to edit your image to get to this stage, which I'm not going to do today. I just wanted to show you how to merge these things together and what you should be expecting to see when you're back into Lightroom. I need to stress that the Photomatix or any other HDR software that you're using isn't where you do your final edit. That comes back into Lightroom, where you can do something more like this. All HDR is doing is taking images, merging them together so that you have enough light to create a well-lit image. It is not how a photo should look. It is not that kind of thing. It's a tool to help you create an image like you would on any other photo. So I hope that helps. Hope that explains HDR a little bit more. I hope that helps if you're finding yourself making those images that I kind of, well, said were horrible, that you can pull something a little more together in terms of making it still look like a regular photograph, just with the ability to have all the light detail, the dynamic range of an image. Well, that's all I will do today. Thanks for watching. Remember to head over to lightscameradad.com, subscribe to the blog, and maybe spend some time looking at a few of the posts that I write. Thanks for watching.